Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into a topic that seems to be everywhere, minimalist living.
It really does.
And if you're listening, you probably want to get a good handle on it quickly and thoroughly. That's what we're aiming for.
Yep. We've gone through our source material, episode 20, minimalistliving.pdf.
And our mission today is really to go, beyond just the surface look,
Yeah.
the tidy rooms.
Right. Beyond the aesthetics, we want to unpack the philosophy, the psychology, how it looks across different cultures, the ethics, the whole picture.
Okay, so let's dive right in, because usually when you say minimalism, people picture something very specific, don't they?
To do, usually that very clean, maybe stylish look. Our source material calls this aesthetic minimalism.
Aesthetic minimalism.
Yeah. Think, the all-white rooms, maybe one very expensive designer couch.
Huh, right. Like that $3,000 sofa example in the source. Which is kind of ironic, isn't it? If it's supposed to be about less.
Exactly. Is it really about reducing consumption or just curating a specific, sometimes costly look? And that's where the source contrasts it with philosophical minimalism.
Okay, so what's the core difference there?
Well, philosophical minimalism is less about the look and more about the mindset. It's about intentional living.
Intentional living.
Yes, and non-attachment to material things, reducing our reliance on, well, stuff. It pulls from traditions like Buddhism, non-attachment, reducing suffering, and Stoicism, finding peace internally, not to possessions.
So a home could look minimalist but not feel peaceful, or vice versa.
Precisely, the source makes that point. A peaceful home isn't always visually minimalist. A cozy, maybe slightly cluttered space filled with intention and meaning can feel incredibly serene. It's about the why behind it.
That makes a lot more sense. It's the intention, not just the inventory. And this idea looks different across cultures too, right?
Oh, absolutely. The source highlights some really interesting examples, like Japanese Zen design. A key concept there is ma. It's often called negative space, but it's more active than that. It's the space between things that gives shape and meaning, like silence in music.
So the emptiness itself has value.
Exactly. It encourages contemplation, appreciating simplicity, nature. There's also this sense of impermanence built in.
Which feels quite different from, say, the Scandinavian approach. Hygge and lagom. That sounds warmer.
It definitely is. Hygge is all about that cozy, comfortable feeling, finding joy in simple things. And lagom. Lagom is the idea of just enough.
Not too much, not too little.
Right. Balance, moderation.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily about starkness or radical decluttering, more about contentment. It's a different flavor of minimalism, you could say.
And then you have traditions where it's not just a preference, but a spiritual path.
Yes, the monastic traditions, Christian, Buddhist.
Mm-hmm.
For monks and nuns, simplicity isn't an aesthetic choice, it's a discipline, a way to detach from worldly stuff and focus inward.
Right, but this feels really important. Our source stresses that for many, many people, living with less isn't a choice at all.
This is absolutely crucial. It's what the source calls minimalism by necessity.
Necessity.
Yeah. People experiencing poverty, refugees forced to leave everything behind, people
Yeah.
displaced by conflict or disaster. They live with minimal possessions because they have no other option. It's not a lifestyle trend, it's survival.
It really puts the whole idea of choosing minimalism into perspective.
It does.
Yeah.
It highlights the privilege that often underlies the choice to live with less. It's a choice for some, a lack of choice for many others.
Very grounding point.
Well,
Okay, so shifting gears a bit. If someone does choose this path, what's going on psychologically? What are the effects?
Well, there could be real benefits. The source mentions mental clarity and reduced stress.
How does that work?
The idea is basically that physical clutter creates mental clutter. Too much stuff bombards our senses, competes for attention, increases stress.
Right, makes it hard to focus.
Exactly. So a simpler environment can feel calmer, free up mental bandwidth, maybe reduce anxiety, less visual noise, less mental noise.
That makes intuitive sense.
And this can also feed into enhanced well-being by deliberately shifting focus away from acquiring things.
You value experiences more. Relationships.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Prioritizing experiences, personal growth, connections over possessions, that could lead to greater life satisfaction overall.
But it's not all positive, is it? The source talks about psychological shadows. What are those?
Yeah, there are potential downsides. One is this tension between decision fatigue and over-control.
Okay.
So minimalism might reduce decisions about what to buy or keep. Good, right. But for some, it can morph into a new kind of obsession. Perfectionism about staying minimalist, anxiety over owning anything deemed non-essential.
So the simplification itself becomes stressful.
It can, yeah. The goal of less stress ironically creates a new source of stress and control. Another shadow mentioned is minimalism as emotional avoidance.
What does that mean? Avoiding emotions by decluttering.
Sort of. Getting rid of stuff can feel really productive, like you're clearing things out emotionally too.
Yeah.
But are you actually processing the feelings attached to those objects? Or just tossing the object to avoid the feeling?
Like getting rid of old photos instead of dealing with the memories.
Exactly. Decluttering can sometimes be a form of escapism. The source asks a really potent question. Are you letting go of clutter? Or are you also letting go of grief, growth, maybe even parts of your identity without realizing it?
Wow, that's deep. Something to really think about during the process.
Definitely requires some self-reflection.
So how do these ideas actually play out in real life? In our homes and lifestyles, the source looks at different examples, right?
Yes, these architectural and lifestyle expressions. Think about college dorms.
Okay, yeah, tiny space, got to be efficient.
Right. It's often minimalism out of necessity, because of the limited space, not always a deep philosophical choice. But students get good at making it work.
Then there's the tiny home movement. That feels much more intentional.
Absolutely. People often choose tiny homes for specific reasons. Smaller environmental impact, less debt, a simpler life. It's usually a very conscious, value-driven decision.
And digital nomad setups, that links minimalism with technology. Yeah.
It does. Using tech to enable a mobile life with fewer physical ties. But again, the source points out the privilege involved needing passports, savings, remote work capabilities.
Right, that access issue again. What about retirement villages?
Similar dynamic in some ways. People downsize often for simplicity, mobility, access to support. Practical needs for that life stage become key drivers for having less stuff around.
And van life. That gets romanticized a lot.
It does. The appeal is freedom, adventure. But the source also notes the critiques overlooking the practical hardships, the gap between the Instagram image and the reality.
So lots of different contexts. The source also mentions compact living spaces generally and the idea of design efficiency.
Yeah, grouping things like tiny houses, mobile homes, dorms, they all force efficient space use. And minimalist design efficiency is about function, ruling form, clean lines, purposeful spaces, nothing extra. Just utility and maybe harmony.
Okay. So the way we live physically reflects these different facets. Now, let's dig into the ethics. The source raises some tricky ethical considerations.
Yes, and these are really important, like the concept of curated scarcity.
Curated scarcity sounds like a fancy term for pretending.
Kind of.
Yeah.
It's about, say, online influencers showing these incredibly sparse, beautiful homes. But is it real? Do they have storage units? Multiple homes? Does the image match the reality of their consumption?
Right. Is it less just for show?
It raises that question.
Mm.
And tied to that is the hidden labor.
The effort needed to keep things looking so minimal.
Exactly. Maintaining that pristine look takes time, effort, or sometimes paid help, which isn't always acknowledged in the minimalist narrative.
Which brings us back to access to choice.
Absolutely. Choosing minimalism, especially the kind with high-quality, long-lasting, ethically sourced items, often requires financial security.
Yeah.
Which leads to that provocative question in the source. Is minimalism becoming a new kind of status symbol?
Signaling taste and affluence through absence.
It's a possibility to consider. Then there's consumer responsibility. Minimalism does encourage thinking more about what we buy, the environmental impact, the social cost.
Which seems like a positive ethical dimension.
It can be. But again, access to genuinely sustainable and ethical options often circles back to privilege and affordability. It's complex.
Definitely a tangled web. Okay, let's move towards the deeper philosophy. Our source delves into some philosophical reflections.
Yeah, getting to the why behind it all. A core piece is defining needs versus wants.
The classic question.
Right. Minimalism pushes you to really examine that. What's truly essential for your well-being versus what's just a desire. It forces you to clarify your values.
And the source stresses that there's no single right answer, correct?
Exactly. The relativity of the ideal life is key. Minimalism isn't a strict dogma. What's ideal or enough is totally subjective, personal, cultural.
Which leads to some big questions the source poses.
It does. Like, is there some inherent moral good in living with less? What does enough actually mean for me? Is minimalism about the look, or is it about freedom from desire?
Can it coexist with luxury?
Right. Or does it fundamentally resist it? And what happens when these spiritual ideas about simplicity crash into modern capitalism? Lots to chew on there.
For sure. And for people who want to explore more, the source mentions a few cultural touch points.
Yes, some key books. You've probably heard of Marie Kondo's The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up the Whole Spark Joy thing.
Yeah, that one was huge.
Then there's Goodbye, things by Fumio Sasaki, which is a more radical Japanese take. And Essentialism by Greg McKeown, less about physical stuff, more about mental minimalism, focusing on what truly matters.
And films.
Yep. There's the documentary Minimalism,
Mm.
a documentary about the important things. Also films like Into the Wild, exploring freedom and simplicity, but also isolation. And Nomadland, which looks at minimalism tied to economic necessity.
Okay, good pointers for anyone interested. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the main takeaway? The core message?
I think the source puts it really well. Minimalism is not about empty rooms. It's about room to breathe.
Ah, I like that. Room to breathe.
Yeah, and maybe even more. It's not about owning less, but about needing less to feel whole.
That really shifts the focus inward, doesn't it? Away from just the objects.
Completely. And maybe the ultimate question isn't just how much should I own? It's more like how much do I actually need to be myself?
To be authentic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because, as the source suggests, sometimes, you know, a quiet space, a comfortable chair you love, maybe a view of the sun, that can be worth more than all the possessions in the world.
A really powerful thought to end on. Thanks for digging into this with me.
My pleasure.
We hope this gives you all something to think about regarding your own relationship with things, with needs, with enough. Until next time on The Deep Dive.